Welcome to today's webinar with the Oregon Water Futures Project. The Oregon Water Futures Project is a collaboration between water and environmental justice interests, Indigenous peoples, communities of color, low-income communities, and academic institutions here in Oregon. Through a water justice lens, we aim to impact how the future of water in Oregon is imagined through storytelling, capacity building, relationship building, policy making, and community-centered advocacy at the state and local level. Today, we will be presenting our findings from the Water Futures Report from 2020. The Oregon Water Futures team is a collaboration between the Coalition of Communities of Color, Verde, Oregon Environmental Council, Willamette Partnership, and Dr. Alai Reyes-Santos from the University of Oregon. Today, from the project team, we have Taryn Evans from Coalition of Communities of Color, Winnie Brown from Willamette Partnership, Cheyenne Holiday from Verde, and I am Stacy Dalgard with Oregon Environmental Council.
Oregon's water resource decisions have created wealth for some and disparities for others. This started with the broken treaties between the US government and sovereign tribal nations. These power dynamics continue to influence who makes water decisions, reinforcing a policy and funding cycle that is consistently dominated by the same voices. This creates a huge gap between the conversations state and local decision makers are having and the daily experiences of many Oregonians. These systems also ignore the traditional ecological knowledge held by Oregon tribes, Native communities, and Indigenous peoples on how to care for water, as well as the ecological values and practices that communities of color and low-income households contribute to the state. The Oregon Water Futures Project worked to eliminate what water justice means to Oregonians on the front lines of our water challenges through community conversations and partnerships. Our project goals were to lift up voices from across the state about water and environmental justice issues, identify community priorities for water and culturally specific resiliency, build capacity around water advocacy, and foster a statewide water justice movement. Through this project, we partnered with Cocoon in Marion and Polk counties, the Chinook Indian Nation in Clatsop County, Uvalcree in the Umatilla and Malheur counties, Unite Oregon in Clackamas County, Verde and the Coalition of Communities of Color in Multnomah County, and the Eugene Springfield chapter of the NAACP in Lane County. When approaching this project, we were able to identify some community engagement best practices. We started by building capacity during the summer with a summer webinar series. We also pursued collaborative partnerships with community-based organizations, which led to an opportunity for us to identify shared goals and support community capacity building. We had to evolve the scope of the project, including the timing. We had to be flexible and adaptable by evolving the scope of the project, our approach and timing based on the current events, partner needs, and the community realities. We worked to create as much access as possible, whether we were in person or virtual. We prioritized approaches that made it accessible for as many people to participate as possible. This included investing in technology for simultaneous translation in 4 languages during one virtual event, and switching to one-on-one phone interviews to bridge the digital divide for those who did not have internet access. We worked to tap into people's existing values and languages. This included framing conversations in an approachable way that allows people to talk about water on their own terms. Many people have deep ecological knowledge and conservation experience to share, but government programs and public engagement processes can be opaque and inaccessible to average community members. We also ensured adequate funding for this project, as it's important to move beyond the transactional community outreach approach. Staff must be resourced for their role to increase accessibility by providing childcare and food for in-person events, translation and transcriptions, and honoraria for participation. During our project, one approach that we really focused on was not one size fits all. Each of our community engagements were completely different based on the community we partnered with. During the project, we had to constantly adjust our approach during our community engagement due to COVID-19, the economic crisis, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the wildfires. During this time, we were able to conduct 2 online gatherings and 75 phone interviews. We had a total of 104 participants, including Native, Latinx, Black, and migrant communities. Most of our participants were low income or working class and were renters, although we had some homeowners. One particular community engagement, we were able to hold a Zoom with 4 different languages.
Thank you, Cheyenne. My name is Taryn Evans. I'm the Environmental Justice Director at the Coalition of Communities of Color. And I'm going to be sharing about some of the statewide themes that emerged from our community conversations. So the first theme that I'm going to be talking about is relating to water values. We learned that there was extensive knowledge and experience amongst community members to contribute to achieving Oregon's water resource goals. Participants are really very motivated to learn more about water. And we also heard that supporting the growth of community leadership is really key in that. The second theme is related to capacity. We heard a lot about water resource challenges tied to community capacity needs. Some examples of that are challenges related to federal recognition of Indian tribes, challenges related to youth education and social cohesion. And until these needs are met, accessing water policymaking and advocacy can be out of reach for a lot of communities. We also heard that there's significant distrust of drinking water among a lot of the communities that we spoke to. And this is due to lack of information, poor communication during emergencies. And something that we heard almost across the board was that a lot of community members don't know where their water comes from, and that contributes to the sense of distrust. Another issue that we heard was related to access to information, particularly for renters or those living in employer-provided housing. That this creates some of the biggest barriers to accessing information about water quality and cost. For example, folks in those situations don't directly receive water bills or water quality reports, and there's lack of regulation and requirements for landlords to provide this information. Another issue that we heard a lot about were just generally serious water challenges. A lot of community members talked about their water having an unpleasant smell, taste, or appearance. We had some folks talk about feeling like they got sick from drinking their tap water, about their tap water staining their sinks and clothing. We also heard from a lot of folks that they actually purchased bottled water due to concerns about the quality of their tap water and a perception that bottled water was safer, but of course that creates an additional financial strain to have to purchase bottled water. There was also concern from community members about lack of programs to assist them with their water bills. We also heard a lot about well water. There was inherent distrust of this domestic wells or agricultural wells due to a sense of there being not enough routine testing and regulation. We also heard a lot about emergency preparedness. A lot of community members said that they felt unprepared. A lot of this was tied to money or lack of resources in general in multiple languages. And so some potential actions that we think could help address some of these concerns are just more community engagement funding tied to infrastructure dollars, more access to testing and filters, infrastructure improvements, more bill assistance programs for water, and trust building is something that we feel is really key. Improved well water regulation, we feel, is also very much needed. And there's a real need for culturally inclusive emergency response plans. And we feel that culturally based organizations, or community-based organizations rather, can be really key in that.
Great, thank you. So we are really excited about what's next in this project. There are 3 main areas that we'll be focusing on in the next couple of years. First, the Oregon Water Justice Framework will will be a framework for community priorities and help build a policy agenda over the next couple of years. This will be a tool for decision makers and advocates to better understand water justice issues in the state of Oregon and also address those issues. Second, we are building community capacity through a Water Justice Institute. Community members who are most impacted by water issues will gather and learn about water policy in the state, and also help drive water infrastructure and water policy priorities. Finally, we are developing a water justice network to build a water justice movement across Oregon. Right now, this network is centered on frontline community leadership and the community organizations that represent them. These three pillars of work are what the Oregon Water Futures team will be working on for the next 2 years. We're really excited to share our work to build new partnerships and to advance water justice across Oregon. I want to thank everyone here today on the Oregon Water Futures team. And for those of you listening, thank you for taking the time. We hope that this presentation is helpful for thinking about the future of water justice in Oregon. And we encourage you and your organizations to advance some of these stories that we heard and incorporate them into the work that you're doing as we move into a more just water future for Oregon. Thank you so much.